Hello there. Today I hope I've got a bit of a treat for you. Alsace truly seems to brim with quite special vineyards, but this actually is one that stands out enormously. This is from the Grand Cru Rangen de Thann, and actually it's from a plot within that Grand Cru, specifically the Clos and Theobald. It's the 2020 Pinot Gris from Domaine Schoffit. And Schoffit are a very special house as well. They trace their winemaking heritage back to 1599, although, to be fair, I don't think Robert Schoffit actually registered the winery as an enterprise solely as a winery until 1973. Robert Schoffit was one of two people who were inspirational in reclaiming, really, the Grand Cru Rangen de Thann, which for years had been a legendary vineyard, but after phylloxera had really fallen into decline. And today, Schoffit own somewhere in the region of 6.5 hectares in the 18.8 hectares that make up the Grand Cru. So Bernard Schoffit, along with Leonhard Humbrecht of Zindumbrecht, they were the two pioneers of restoring this fabulous old vineyard that had largely been neglected. I mean, I think in the 1970s there was a stage where only 4 hectares of vines still existed on the Rangen de Thann, and those were all on the lower, less steeply sloping portions of the vineyard down near the river. And the incredible work went on to remove the roots of trees that had grown there, to rebuild all the walls. I mean, for instance, I think Clos and Theobald is a walled clos, so all these stone walls had to be replaced and repaired. And in fact, even today, one of the reasons for the abandonment of Rangen de Thann is its steepness makes it very difficult to work. And I mean, it comprises about a third of Domaine Schoffit's vineyard holdings, but evidently it takes up something in the region of sort of 60% of their time to manage the vines here. And I think Pinot Gris is actually the dominant variety on the Cru, although Riesling also features, as does Gewürztraminer. I believe there's some Muscat growing there as well. For Domaine Schoffit, their plantings are 40% of Riesling and Pinot Gris, and then they have 15% of Gewürztraminer, and Muscat makes up the remainder of that. So what makes Rangen de Thann a special vineyard? Well, its situation, its soils and its history all mark it out as somewhere quite particular. Records going back evidently from the Murbach Abbey show that in 1272 the entire of this hillside was covered in vines, so it has a long history of viticulture. There are notes in the history of Thann itself, a town that was founded in 1161, that remark on 1186 as having been a really good vintage, so if you ever see any of that, good luck. And these wines were highly respected. The court of Marie Theresa, for instance, they're known to have been served there. The site, as I say, it's steep, it sits above the river Thur on a, as it were, side valley. The steep slopes face entirely due south. They are made up of dark volcanic rock-based soils, so you have quite a shallow, sort of 40 centimetres or so, of a mixture of grey-wacky tufa and sandstone above fissured rock to which the vine's roots can go to work their way down. And this dark soil on a south-facing slope enables the grapes here to gain high ripeness. There's good water availability, evidently there's about 750 millimetres of rain a year. Here they're on the most southerly of Alsace's Grand Cru vineyards. Altitude is about 350 to 450 metres above sea level, so there is a slight cooling influence, but often the season will go on here into October, November, and thus you can get very high ripeness in the fruit. As far as production methods are concerned for Schoffit, they start with the fact that all their vines are managed organically and certified as such, but they also use some biodynamic methods to their farming. Vine age is over 20 years and up to 80 years in some places, I believe. Fruit is hand-picked. On a steep slope like this you have to. Fermentation is with the natural yeasts that have come in from the vineyard, so actually it can take an awfully long time, somewhere between say 3 months and a year in a cool season. Fermentation goes on in stainless steel tanks, with the wine being moved to barrel to age for a further 12 months. For a period of that it will have its lees with it as well to add richness as well. So let's have a look at the wine and see what we make of it, shall we? Start off by saying you've got a relatively deep not really yellow. I would actually say that was a sort of a straw colour. There's almost an orangey edge to it. Smelling it, there's an incredibly rich, ripe, juicy, oily, I would start by sort of saying pear notes, but actually there's a much richer sort of ripe peach sort of touch in there as well. Almost a sort of creamy vanilla-y notes coming from the fruit. That's not oak influence. Perhaps some waxy hints as well. So let's have a taste and see what we make of it. The first impression I get is that of sweetness. Evidently there's 26 grams per litre of sugar in there, which is not really hugely sweet, but there's a richness to it as well and an oily texture, and that's making that sweetness seem more intense. There are honeyed notes, notes of honeysuckle. There's some really lovely lifted, almost blossom-like aromatics at the beginning of the wine. And then you go through to there is this sort of rich, very ripe pear through to peachy richness in the fruit at its core. And the richness is sort of a rounded, almost syrupy to the wine. The wine has 14.5% alcohol according to its label, so that's helping to add quite a lot of body to the mid-palate. But actually, there is so much fruit in there that the alcohol doesn't stand out. It doesn't make the wine seem alcoholic. There's also lovely freshness. When I'm talking about pear, there's that sort of cut of the acidity on a pear as well. And that follows through quite nicely to the finish. You know, the acidity isn't sort of minerally and sharp, but it is present, and it's giving the fruit some liveliness. There's really no note of oak there at all. The roundness of the texture would point to the lees aging that's there. The length, there's a nice length to the wine, and in fact, some of the pear-like notes, there's a tiny touch, I think, of phenolics, of tannins at the end. There's a bit of structure, not huge. This is a big wine, it's definitely full body, and the sweetness remains to the finish, but it doesn't in any way make it cloying. It's not sweet enough to achieve that. The acidity giving nice length and freshness. So yes, that's a very impressive wine. It's a young wine. I would hope that that would develop. I mean, there's lovely complexity there in the sort of the depth of the fruit, with the delicacy of some of the perfume notes there as well. The rich alcohol will help it age, and as I say, it's not overpowering. The wine has enough fruit that it can take the quite high alcohol level here without it seeming unbalanced. So I think this is probably a wine that could be aged for 10-15 years longer if you like those intensely developed, rich, waxy, ripe flavours of old bottle-aged Pinot Gris. It's also a wine that could be broached very, very enjoyably now with rich foods. I think this would go really nicely with some cheeses and perhaps some smoked ham or something like that. Foods with plentiful flavour. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed the tasting. If you do, please feel free to share it with your friends. Do feel free to press the like button. Do think about signing up and following us on YouTube. That would be fantastic to have your support. And do leave your comments. We'd love to hear what you think about these wines, about the wines we're tasting, other wines we're tasting, or about any other related subjects. But whatever, hopefully we'll see you again for another tasting in the very near future. Bye for now.